Our first person is going to talk is with Rainbow Glade Design.
Oh, I get to go first. Okay.
You were first on my list.
Oh, okay.
Were you told, if you were told otherwise, I can switch you around.
I have no idea. I'm just here.
Okay.
I follow directions, so let's run with it. So anyway, I'm Catherine Dare, Rainbow Glade Designs, and before Rainbow Glade Designs was ever a thing, I was just Catherine Dare drawing things, and I have the worst tagline in the world, which is I make stuff. But I started my career doing illustrations for authors in queer romance and sci-fi and fantasy, and got to do all kinds and still get to do all kinds of fun art for that. And that ranges from book covers and character illustrations and collector cards and maps for books and author branding. I've kind of drawn everything out there. And in the middle of all that, I was making doodles that people tended to like, and that branched out into web comics and then into comic collections I self-published, and ended up taking lots of stuff to conventions. And now I've opened an Etsy store because we're not going to conventions for a while yet until everybody gets a vaccine. Get your vaccine. And here I am, and hope you come visit my Etsy store and see what it's all about and all the crazy things that I draw. Oh, and J. Scott, hello, Scott. And I know you know the answer to this question, but nobody else does. Do you create logo art and avatars for authors? Wow, do I? Yeah, I've created everything from doing animals and fun, crafty, stylish things with initials and coffee cups, you name it, I've probably drawn it as a logo, which is kind of fun because that's half the fun of illustrating. You never know what's coming next. And I get challenged all the time. Can you draw this? And I think, I don't know. I've never drawn that before. Let's try. So let's see. So when I branched out into self-publishing, I became known as the bunny lady because I drew two little boy bunnies holding a pride flag back in 2014. And somebody said, you know, what if you actually made a comic out of that? And it seemed like a crazy idea. And I thought, well, okay. And I had to think of names for them. And I started with a Valentine's Day comic in 2015. And it ran from there. And now they have their first comic collection. They have their first graphic novel, which is, I can't wait to listen to Dylan because I'm kind of faking it till I make it on the publishing a graphic novel. I'd never done it before. And I'm already about to probably jump down that hole and do it again later this year. So, and it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. So now I have to really fake it because there's no more questions. So other than the bunnies, I've also got a hippo named Dashiell Bartholomew Wilder, who is this gender-bending miniature hippo who loves vocabulary words and dressing up and firmly believes that you should do what you want that makes you happy. And if nobody likes that, that's okay. So today you feel like going out in a top hat and a tutu, that's perfectly fine, because why shouldn't you? He also likes dressing up as a hippocorn and having adventures and learning new words. And so he's hopefully, so I'm trying to figure out, can we see some of your, yeah, it's on my website and in the Etsy store, but how do I show it on camera?
There should be a share screen button if you have
you
have something pulled up on your computer.
Okay, yes, let me.
Then you can pull something up on your computer.
I should have prepared something and I didn't know I could do that. Files.
If you just have something that you can grab, I recommend turning off your background because otherwise.
Yeah, it's actually not gonna work. So let me turn off the background quick. This is the first time I've ever done this. So again, I am faking it till I make it here so I can figure out how to turn off the background. Except you're going to see my really messy family room after that.
We might just survive.
Yeah, I know. It's like
you can also put a link.
Working from home and the exercise machine lives behind your desk that is collecting dust that you don't use. So
you can also put a link to your Etsy store in the chat, and we can go there. We can all click the link.
Cancel it. Just I want no back. Yeah, none. Here we go. Okay, there's the messy. And you can kind of see the other half of what I do over in the other corner. Okay, so now I have to figure out how to share really quick. So I have there's like 3 balls I balance between doing work for authors, doing my own thing, and then I also sew. We started making masks in the pandemic as just sort of a way to deal with the stress of a pandemic. And I was asked to try and develop a mask for an autistic person who was having trouble tolerating them, and it kind of ran from there. So I did not prepare this well. You know what? I'm just going to hold stuff up. How's that? So this is the crazy graphic novel that called The Secret of the Carrot Medallions. And Skip and Pepper are these 2 little boy bunnies in love, and they have kind of the same conversations that most couples do. And why are they bunnies? It's a really good question, because when I started doing their comics and I made them rated G, because there was a lot of kids in my life, and I started interacting with families who said there wasn't a lot of stories to read to their kids that were LGBT friendly and had LGBT plus characters. So I went out and started looking to investigate that. And it was true, there was a lot of, I have 2 moms and I have 2 dad kind of books, and those are great books to have, of course. But there weren't a lot of stories that you had animals that were also, you know, identified not straight and being cute and having fun. I mean, you watch Disney movies and you get Simba and Nala having fun, but you know, where are the queer characters doing the same thing? So I started having them have friends who all fell into the different colors of the rainbow. And when John Oliver came out with his book 2-3 years ago about the 2 boy bunnies of love, it's kind of a poke to the then current vice president. We won't go there. A lot of fans said, hey, but Catherine was writing about 2 boy bunnies in love too. And I still think, you know, that's okay. I wrote a comic about that. It's okay to, all the stories where bunnies in love are fine. And Pip said in the comic, well, but if you write a story about us, make us pirates. And their fans said, we want a pirate story. And I thought it would be 10 pages. And I would post it as a serial comic. And sure enough, it became 72 pages, a little longer than that. And who knew I was going to actually create a graphic novel? And I learned a lot about what not to do and what to do in a graphic novel. And it was a lot of fun. And I kind of can't wait to do it again, even though it's a lot of work. And let's see, what have I got? Within easy reach. Just some.
This is the magic of live television, people.
So a lot of the stuff I do for authors is on my webpage, and I don't actually print those out because I can't sell those. They buy that art from me to put into their own books, and it's art that they want to show, not me. And I completely understand that. That's what we agreed to right at the beginning. So a lot of that is on my website, but it's not things I print out and share. Mostly let them do it. But on the silly kind of fun, when I'm going down the crazy character route, like I started, let's see, if I can do, oh, the glare is terrible. I started developing alternative unicorns and writing crazy descriptions for them. So this is the boxy corn. And somebody said, oh, but would you make an otter as a unicorn? And that for weeks started becoming alternative unicorns. And that's really where a lot of my artwork comes from. Somebody just tosses an idea on a Facebook page, on my Facebook page, and makes a comment and I run with it. So there's not a lot of planning to the artwork that I do. I just kind of run with it.
That's really awesome. What's your favorite alternative unicorn?
Let me see, because I have them all here, because I sell them as prints. Probably the ottercorn, and I'll have to tell you why, because there's the ottercorn. And I'll read the description. Ottercorns are often seen in North America, freshwater rivers and streams. Very mischievous by nature, the only reason an ottercorn has a horn is to cause trouble. Their favorite game is to glide underneath unsuspecting swimmers and poke them with their horn, quickly diving away before being seen. Ottercorns are drawn to shiny items such as glossy pebbles, sparkly jewelry, and gold coins. They keep their treasures in secret stashes, which are rarely discovered. Offer an otter corn a bauble and you'll make a fast friend. It won't save you from the headbutt. So that really showcases my bizarre sense of humor. And a lot of my artwork is just kind of crazy and whimsical like that. Because I like making people smile. You know, and especially in the last year, we haven't had a lot of reason to smile. So that's why I think we just need more escapism and things to distract us, which is kind of what became a thing when I say I make other things. I didn't know I was going to start a whole line of little tiny plushes, and I was making them at night as therapy for dealing with a pandemic. And they became grumpy little critters. And I didn't know they would be grumpy, but they came out grumpy. This is the grumpy hedgehog. And there's grumpy narwhals and grumpy bats. And I was just making them at night sitting in front of the TV. And people said, I want to buy one. I have a wait list that is unbelievably long. They sell out in 5 minutes on Etsy when I put up 8 to 10 at a time. I can't keep up with the orders. And it's another thing that kind of makes people smile, because it just came out of my crazy sense of humor that this was just how I'm feeling. I'm over 2020 and this is the mood. And everybody said, yes, we get it. We're in that mood too. And now grumpy critters have become another branch of my business, which is why it's kind of a crazy business. It does so many different things. Scott wants to know, how has COVID affected your art? It has affected it. Horribly. 2020 was hard, and my art comes from a happy place. At least that's where I've always tried for it to come from. And when you're not happy, you can't create it. I lost a parent last year, and so when you're dealing with all of that, it's really hard to find your happy place. I didn't do a lot of creating in 2020, and it was hard watching people have all that downtime at home and taking advantage of all that creativity, but I wasn't one of those people who did a great job with that. So if you were one of those people who struggled too, wow, do I get you. And I'm just now finding it again. It's taking me longer to finish projects than I would like. My attention span is shorter, but it's finally starting to come back. And I think it's probably because we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel in 2021, and we can actually see, yes, things, we're going to have a new normal, but at least it's going to be a little closer to the normal we used to know.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And please remember to put your links in the chat. There also, I put the Etsy store there.
Oh, thank you.
There are also links on the Rainbow Space Magic page, on the vendor page. And yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Very cute. All right. Our next person in line is Dylan Edwards, Comics and Arts. So Dylan, are you able to start your video and audio?
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, I tried to get the lighting better in here, but we'll see if it stays light or if it goes dark on us. Hello, everyone. I am Dylan Edwards. I am a cartoonist and artist of various things. My main thing is doing comics. I have arrayed my desk with a bunch of different things to show you, so it's very messy. But anyway, some of the things I do include my sci-fi fantasy series, Valley of the Silk Sky, which I have as self-published books and as zines. And actually, I was gonna, let me see if I can just dump a whole bunch of links in here at once.
I'm learning here on what to do next time.
So I just put in the chat links to a bunch of different things. So the comics websites, you can read a bunch of my comics online for no money at all. But like I said, I have book collections of a bunch of them, and my Gumroad store also has you can download digital copies of the comics as well. So anyway, Valley of the Silk Sky, queer YA, sci-fi, and my cat is trying to destroy the carpet right now, so I'm slightly distracted. I also have this series called Cat Person, which is autobiographical comics about queer, asexual, and trans stuff. I'll be reading to you from this book in just a minute. And I do it like the comics I both do as web comics and as books. So if you go to the website, I have like the book links where you can find all the books that I've done. And the monster stuff, the Feeping Creatures, are just sort of like generally not carefully planned out things. It's just like, I want to, you know, create an image of a monster and do something fun with it. So for example, this is a vinyl sticker of a fox bat and a glow-in-the-dark rat, because everyone needs glow-in-the-dark rats. Bear drinking bubble tea, you know, just kind of very,
So hard.
very random sorts of things. And I also like make little buttons like this platypus and unicorn pig. I have made onesies if you want to, you know, wrap your child or your friend's children in weird monsters. You can do that. Those are in my Etsy store. I had some of my rats turned into socks. These were made in the United States. They're high cotton content, so they're very soft. And, you know, sometimes you just need to cover your feet in rats. So that's the thing I can help you with. And I also have enamel pins, cat in space, single-celled cat, bats, that sort of thing. I make little monsters out of polymer clay, so I have a couple of those here to show you. And these are just sort of like, they're not, again, not terribly carefully planned. I just start rolling out the clay until the monster emerges. And those are the Feeping Creatures. So that's kind of a rundown of the general stuff that I do. And so I have prepared a reading of a couple of comics, like I said. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. So let's see if this will work. I'm sure it'll work. So hopefully this will now be showing on your screen. No, there we go. I actually have to click a button.
Oh.
Okay. So again, Cat Person is queer, asexual, trans autobio comics. And here are a couple of short stories from this particular mini comic collection. Oh, crap. Here we go. So this is a story about my relationship to Luke Skywalker. Some of my earliest memories are inextricably linked to a certain L. Skywalker. Pop. Pull the head off my action figure. I guess they don't make them like they used to. 4-year-old curmudgeon. Poor old Luke. Not as sexy as Han. Not as imposing as Vader. Kind of whiny. But Tashi Station. Power converters. Even so, I always had a soft spot for him. I never quite got the hate. I can't say I was one of those trans kids who always knew. But while I was always very fond of Leia, I even went as her for Halloween once, Luke was the one I had more of a sense of wanting to be. His impulsiveness is always focused on doing what is good and what is right. Get your butt back here. You got classes still. BRB, gotta ditch school to save my friends. Movie romances always put me off for whatever reason. I'm not totally aromantic, but I do find it difficult to feel anything for these pairings. A New Hope initially tried to force Luke into a stereotypical storyline. You're the young hero, so you gotta have a romance with a princess. This could get awkward. I had my own imposed narratives. You're a girl, you'll get married, you'll have kids. In the 2000s, I fell out of love with Star Wars. The prequels, oversaturation, being that nerd, these scenes are lifted directly from Hidden Fortress. The Force Awakens didn't do it for me. These scenes are lifted directly from A New Hope. But after the 2016 election, Rogue One turned out to be something I needed. Crush the Nazis! I don't actually talk in the theater, I promise. In a sea of merchandise that now felt like it was glorifying fascism, symbols of Luke's self-sacrificing heroism took on a new meaning. In 2016, Mark Hamill said this in response to a question about Luke's sexual orientation. I'd say it is meant to be interpreted by the viewer. If you think Luke is gay, of course he is. You could think of him that way if you want, is not as powerful a statement as he definitely is. But leaving Luke's sexuality up for grabs, so to speak, does mean my headcanon of him as asexual is totes valid too. Maybe my connection to Luke isn't a romantic feeling exactly, but it's an attraction all the same. Wedge was always my secret cutie crush. And this next story is about a trip I took to Japan in 2016. This is that one was more about nerd stuff. This one is a more straight up autobiographical thing that relates to, going to Japan and experiencing being a queer trans person in Japan. So this is Tokyo, 20 November 2016. Bars in Japan are often very tiny, accommodating maybe 10 people at most. If they're full by the time you turn up, you can't go in. I am not much of a bar person, and definitely not a going out to bars by myself person. But I've heard about a trans guy bar in Shinjuku, and I'm determined to check it out. Unsure what to expect, I make it a point to get there when 2's cabin opens at 7 p.m. Locked. Jingle clack. 15 minutes late. Shut. What do I do now? Konbanwa. Good evening. My friend Graham Colbeans had been in Japan over the summer to film a documentary about Japanese queer culture. He had interviewed 2's cabin owner Masaki about his trans activism, his DJ work, and his bar. Watashi no tomodachi, my friend. Eiga, the movie. Lots of Japanese. Sumimasen, I'm sorry. Nihongo hanashimasen. I don't speak Japanese. Demo skoshi hanashimasu, but you speak a little. Hai, skoshi. Yes, a little. He sets me up on the bar's Wi-Fi, and we use Google Translate to fill in the gaps. I brought a bunch of comics with me, thinking Japan's trans guys might be interested, even if the comics are in English. I give them to Masaki, and in exchange, he gives me a magazine about Japanese trans guys and a CD. He's very curious about what life is like for trans guys in America. Do you still have uterus? Google Translate hasn't exactly prioritized trans terminology, so our pastiche conversation yields unusually blunt questions. In Japan, he explains, trans people's gender identities aren't legally recognized unless they've had all available surgeries. Cut, cut, cut. In America, most trans guys don't get bottom surgery. You don't usually need it to change your documents. Insurance rarely covers surgery, so no one can afford it. Japan's national health care doesn't cover trans surgery either. We have to go to Thailand. We also exchange terminology. FTM is onabe, non-binary is X-gender, various pronouns there. It's less than 2 weeks after the American presidential election, so of course we discuss the impending Trump administration. Japanese queer and trans folks are as worried as their American counterparts. We quickly hone in on the right word for the situation. Kawaii, scary. After a couple of hours, my not a bar person self catches up to me. Uchi kaerimasu, I'm going home. There are warm goodbyes and selfies, and the customary mutual social media follows. My Japanese still isn't good enough to read most of the text on Masaki's Instagram posts, but I check in regardless, watching for another distant friend's face to pop up in the feed. And that's the end of that comic. So this last one is this little mini comic here, Ugly Little Beast. And this is also in kind of a what do you give to a small child who wants to see themselves reflected in, a comic. And a lot of the comics, like you were saying, are kind of like 2 moms and 2 dads. And so this comic is a little non-binary monster, which is not about identity. It's just the monster happens to be non-binary and is starring in this silly little story called The Ugly Little Beast. Once upon a time, there was an ugly little beast called Trevor. Hi. Trevor's big goal in life was to be a rat catcher. Ha, gotcha. Unfortunately, none of the rat catching guilds in town would admit ugly little beasts. Well, what could Trevor do? Give up on their dreams? No. So they set out in search of a town that would hire them to catch rats. But Trevor was in for a rude awakening. Are you an ugly little beast? Then show off. Town after town, it seemed no one had any use for a rat-catching ugly little beast. Needless to say, Trevor was getting pretty close to despair. Boo-hoo-hoo. Too poor from lack of work to afford an inn, Trevor snuck into an old barn to spend the night. You can probably see where this is going. This barn, like many others, was chock full of rats. When they heard Trevor sobbing, the rats were naturally curious, as rats are wont to be. Boo-hoo! Stay back, George! The biggest and bravest of all the rats was one Squinty Skakes. I didn't get to be where I am today by being no pushover. Squinty didn't care for the mincing of words and elected to cut to the chase. What do you want, huh? Trevor told their sad tale of rejection after rejection and then wailed, all I ever wanted was to be a rat catcher. Sniff. Eek. Gasp. Horrors. The rats were horrified at this revelation and demanded action. Something must be done. Hold up. I got an idea. Squinty Skakes pulled Trevor aside for a little chat. Kid, I know how you can be a rat catcher without them guilds. You do? Let's just say it all worked out okay in the end. And thus ends The Ugly Little Beast, and ends my reading section of this particular, whatever we're doing here. This panel.
That was awesome, Dylan. I love hearing your voices.
Yeah, thank you. Is Cat Person inspired at all by your cat? It's inspired by me making terrible puns and making acronyms, but not specifically my current cat, who is very bad and who has been desperately trying to get my attention this entire time. But yay! Any other questions or anything like that? I have 3 minutes.
I have a question.
Yes.
So how did you know, where did you get your knowledge on how to put together your graphic novels? Do you outline them in advance? I mean, do you know it's going to be a graphic novel? What's your thought process on all of that? How do you do it?
I started out doing much shorter pieces. So for the first several years of my creation process, I was doing like single panel comics and single page comics. And actually this book right here is this is a collection of some of my earliest, a lot of it is some of my earliest comics and some of it is newer work, but like this little strip right here was the very first thing I ever put together, and it was very much a learning process. But basically, once I had kind of a stack of pages together, it was enough to put into collected works or to publish online as like an ongoing thing. And as far as like actually putting together a full-size book like this, this was something where an editor contacted me about putting together a book for publication. So at that point, once I had actually signed a book deal, I was working with an editor. So for that process where I wasn't kind of creating a page at a time, I was doing thumbnails, like doing scripted stories as thumbnails, and then kind of handing that off to the editor, and the editor being like, this part's good, this part is not so good, you know, and then working back and forth in that process. And that helped with putting together my webcomic Valley of Silk Sky, which is all on my own, but having that mental process already of like, here's like me anticipating what the editor would say, that helped with creating that work. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I hope that answers it. And if not, you know, like interrupt some stuff in the chat. How did you own your identity? It's impressive how you are. I have always been a weirdo. So this is in the questions, how did you own your identity? I think I was an obstinate child, and that has continued into adulthood. And once you've decided to be a cartoonist, you're already like going off into weird territory. So, you know, like it's getting more and more accepted by mainstream publishing, but it's still kind of in a situation where it's like, comics, what? Yeah. So once you've decided to be comics, what, you're kind of already on the path of like, whatever, here we go.
I get you.
Yeah.
I do.
Yay. All right. Well, thank you all for listening to me read, and I think we're on to the next.
Thank you, Dylan, and and catch Dylan in Discord later, maybe, and then you posted all your links in the chat, so
I did.
They're all there. All right, our next person is Space Wizards.
Hello. I'm Sarah.
If the other panelists can turn off their video, that helps.
Okay.
But Space Wizards, you're on.
Okay. All right. So I'm Sarah. I'm one of 3 authors in the group, but figured it was easier to just have one of us here today. So, like I said, we're 3 authors. We've all published our books separately, but we are in a critique group. We all critique each other's stories. We kind of leave a big imprint on each other's works. That's why we've kind of come at this panel as a group instead of just, you know, having one of us come on. I'm going to share my screen because I have some slides, and I find it a lot easier to stay on track if I have some type of visual. I just need to pull up. Got caught up listening to everything and didn't pull this up ahead of time. So let's see. All right, and okay. So like I said, we are 3 authors, of course, science fiction and fantasy. So the first one book I'm going to talk about is the Arduino series by Jsfield. And this book, the series is, I'm really bad at talking sometimes. They call it like Firefly, but with lesbians, and it doesn't get canceled after season 1. It has a slow burn romance, but not until book 2. Some of my favorite one of my favorite things about these, aside from an awesome cast of characters, is how the author is a scientist with that studies wood and fungi, and so much of that gets like integrated into these books that there's some really cool science mixed in with the fiction. So that's one thing that really gets me excited about these. There's also it's also really diverse in terms of gender. And there's more than just one book. After the trilogy, there's a companion anthology of short stories. And the author also has a Patreon where they write more short stories set in this world. The next series of that I'm going to share is William C. Tracy's books, his Dissolution trilogy. So his pitches for these 3 were Seeds of Dissolution, a young bisexual man with anxiety stranded in a civilization of 10 homeworlds connected by music magic instead of spaceflight. The magic system in this series is fantastic. There's a symphony, and different elements of the symphony can do different things, and I love seeing how different characters perceive like the same magic system. Some perceive it more visually, some perceive it more as sound. In book 2, an ancient species is rising once more, and the dissolution is drawing closer. And then in book 3, the fate of Sam and all his friends and allies will decide the fate of another. There's like really high stakes in these books, and the arc the characters go through is really impressed me about these. And Bill also has another book. This is the only one of his books that I haven't read. I joined their group a little bit later, and this one had already gone through before I became part of it. But the pitch is 2 sisters escape servitude, find out they have magic, and plot to overthrow the government. And then there's my books, the Evanstar Chronicles. These are young adult urban fantasy about demon hunters trying to stop the apocalypse. Almost like a young adult cross between Dresden Files and Supernatural, but with a non-binary protagonist. So book 1, Erin is literally fighting demons, and then they also are dealing with some mental health issues, and there's a friends to lovers romance. The second book, Pictured Life Minus Me, is actually a prequel novella set in the same world, but from a different character's point of view. But I think it's best if you read it second, because if you read it first, then it almost spoils a few things about book 1. So it was written second, and it reads better second. So that's Erin's cousin Mel, who's half angel, is trying to, she can heal people, she can read minds, but sometimes she feels like powerless to actually make change and to actually help people. And so this book kind of shows her navigating some of that. And then in Power Inversion, we're back to Erin, and a demon kidnaps the person that they fell in love with in book 1, and now they have to rescue him. And book 1, it tends to be a little bit more internal and focused more on the relationships. Book 2 is a little bit more action heavy, since there's a rescue mission and a ticking clock, and since the love interest is absent for a lot of it, the sort of more quiet moments are about Erin's relationship with their cousin Mel, which had been kind of rocky in book 1, and now they're kind of becoming friends again. So that also kind of is another reason it works to read the prequel novella first, because it sets up for some stuff that's in book 2. And I have one other book coming out this summer. It's a standalone young adult fantasy with a lot of environmental themes. It's a non-binary main character again, who is a very powerful mage, but terrified of using their magic. And then the planet is it's on Earth, but it's a future like alternate Earth, and the planet is awake and angry with humans that had almost destroyed it at one point. And there's like this very tenuous relationship between people and the planet, and if there's an agreement where if people start another war between each other, then the planet's not going to tolerate any humans anymore, because war was one of the things that almost destroyed it. And so our young reluctant mage is kind of in the middle of two groups that are on the brink of going to war with each other, and somehow finds themselves being the one that has to help them see from the same page, and has to like negotiate peace between these two groups. And it's very different from the other things I've written, because I've written urban fantasy, so then going and writing this, which even though it's set on Earth, it really feels more like high fantasy, was a interesting change of pace. But this comes out in July, and I'm very excited about it. And that is my little spiel about all our books. So any questions? Hold on, I've got to escape Google. Okay. It looks like there is something in the Q&A. How did you three form a co-op, and how does it work? What do you do for one another? So we all met through a critique group, and then we kind of were like a group within the group, I guess. And I mean, basically, we're critique partners. We read each other's work, we give each other feedback, we help each other kind of cross promote stuff. If we were in real life, we would probably go to in-person cons together and share tables. We haven't officially announced it yet, so I'm not going to get into any details about it, but we are going to be putting out an anthology of our stories, and we have a couple other authors in our group that aren't published yet, so we will eventually be publishing stuff as a group. Right now, we've only published separately. Jsfield and I both published with 9-Star Press, and my other book is through a different publisher, Aurelia Leo, and Bill has self-published and had one book from 9-Star. So that's, I guess 9-Star is kind of how we all came together with some of our other published books. So we're, a group. We critique each other's work, we collaborate with marketing, and are moving towards publishing some stuff together.
What are you working on right now?
I'm working on finalizing edits for Earth Reclaimed, and I'm working on my stories for the collaborative anthology we're doing. Which I'm like, I want to talk about the anthology, but we haven't officially announced it yet, so I don't want to get into too much detail about it before we've publicly announced it, but
Does Space Wizards have a web page or a mailing list that people can?
so we don't have one web page, but I can post links to all our separate web pages. That was, we're kind of it's informal thing, but these are our individual author websites. And then I can put our by Amazon links to our Amazon pages too. Since our current books are all out with like different places, we don't have like just one place to go get everything right now, but that might change in the future.